Hello, Uncle Ted. We are here with another episode of A Doctor and Priest Walk Into a Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the Feast of the Ascension, which just happened, and really talking about vulnerability and this idea of what does it mean to be poor in spirit. You hear that a lot. You're going to tell us where we hear it, where it comes from. And we will get into how we can learn from that and what it means to lose control. Right? We say that word is a bad thing, to lose control. How can we learn a little bit about the Ascension, about losing control as a good thing? So I know you gave a pretty big homily to 3 different congregations this weekend. One of the great things that we love about you is that you give the same exact homily to conservative groups and liberal groups and in between groups and mixed groups. It doesn't matter to you. You tell it like it is and try to lead people to the water. So tell me how this weekend went for you.
Oh, it went okay, to tell you the truth. Talk about being poor in spirit. I just had a nice 8 hours of sleep, and I think you're in a different situation. So
yes, I am post shift right now. So I had a 12-hour overnight, and it was busy all the way through, right up until the last moment. So,
oh my goodness. Well,
Uncle Ted, I could see our goats in the background of I don't know if you can see that.
Yes, I can a little bit. Yeah,
they are not supposed to be there. They are supposed to be in their pen. So,
well,
we'll get them. They're not going to run away.
They're free. All right. Yeah.
They're free.
Nice to have goats in your backyard.
Yeah.
So this is like walking a tightrope to not be political when you're preaching. So like as a preacher, a Catholic who gets we're not allowed to be actually political. If we're not paying taxes, we can't be political. So we have to not be that way, but we have to tell the truth. So there's a difference, or often there is a difference between being political and being truthful. So I kept wondering, how do you approach what's happening in our society today? What are the basis in the scriptures? What would Jesus say? What would anyone with integrity? How do we operate in order to find the truth? So that's what I struggled with, and I kept thinking about that. And I kept thinking of the Feast of the Ascension, and the Ascension is basically a feast after the resurrection of Jesus, and he leaves the apostles, and he says to them, now I've taught you all this for 3 years. I've been with you. I've shown you what it is to be, who God is, who the Father is, who I am. And he died, suffering on the cross, and then he rose from the dead. But he's commissioning the apostles, to go and do what he taught and proclaim that. So, and the two readings today for the Catholic Church, I think most churches this weekend, were one at the end of the Gospel of Luke, where Luke, for 24 chapters, told the story of Jesus, and then at the end he ascended into heaven and said the same thing I just mentioned, that he's commissioning the apostles to do what he did. And then the next reading is from the Acts of the Apostles, and that's another reading that Luke did all of the Acts of all the apostles. So Luke did the 2 readings, and in the beginning he reminds the reader that Jesus ascended into the heaven, ascended and commissioned. So it's really a feast for anybody listening to that, to claim who we are.
I love this idea. Yeah, I mean, you just reframed the Feast of the Ascension for me in a way that is not don't necessarily think about it that way. We think about it as this moment, this biblical moment in which Jesus ascended into heaven, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
um, that's the event that we think about. But really, it's centered around commissioning
Mm-hmm.
those of us on earth to do what he did, to live by his teachings.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do. And the other reading is from we use in the church is from Ephesians, and in that reading, Paul is writing to the church of Ephesus. Ephesus, by the way, was a very powerful town in Asia Minor, and he spent a lot of time there. Became a center for Christianity. But he, in that reading, is reminding there the people that they are living in this new deep glory of God, the glory of Christ. So when you meditate on that, and we say to ourselves, we do really live in a glory of God. It's hard to see that in the ordinary things going on every day, but there's something about us that has this present, and also we are really called to recognize that we can see this glory everywhere. You have to be realistic, but it's a lot of it is the attitude we have looking around the people we live with, or the politicians we deal with, or the difficulties we have. We could live in kind of the negative, or you could say, well, underneath it, there must be some goodness present there,
Right. Searching for that. And that's a choice, right? That's a choice, just like happiness is a choice.
Right.
I'm literally looking at a sign that's on I'm sitting at Missy, my wife's desk right now, because it's so early in the morning, trying to get away from waking up the household. But it says right on there, choose happy. She's good at that, right? She's really good at that. Just remembering that you can find the goodness in life every day. And it doesn't mean being, Pollyannish, like that everything's good all the time.
Yeah.
It means acknowledging what's not good and finding what is and trying to focus on what is.
Right. And she's great at that. Missy's great at that.
She's so happy. She's such a happy person. Such a happy person, which is unfair. Anyone who's really good at something, when they're that good at it, then when they're not doing it, it feels heavy. So she can be sad too, right? And so that's a lesson I always have to remember, that when she's sad, she needs that support, even though she's so good at turning around on her own.
Mm-hmm.
But so this commissioning, right? Commissioning of people on earth, of us to say, let's move forward and do what Jesus would do. Where does this term poor in spirit come from?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be poor? Why would we want to be poor in spirit? Why wouldn't we want to be, abundant in spirit? What does it mean?
Sure. So I kept thinking about that, and basically, Jesus said to be a Christian, to be his followers, are the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. Blessed are those who really desire and want. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So I was with a couple of poor people this week here where we give out food, and one particular man, he was really strong and healthy, about 40 years old, really, muscular person, but he was riding his bicycle and he was hit by a car and thrown off the bicycle, and the car just left, and he was on the ground, and he felt his ankle, so his ankle was broken. He had to wait almost a half an hour to get some help, but he had walked over to this place where he could pick up some food with crutches, blocks and blocks. And he sat down with us, and he was actually happy. I was so surprised that he was happy, sort of, and he had all these chains around his neck, and rings on his finger. He was someone that would ride these boards, side boards. What do you call those things? Anyway, and so he was very athletic, but he wasn't angry about the man who hit him. He was sort of confident. So that's what I mean by being poor in spirit. It's sort of an openness to the goodness despite the pain, and that's the way it is to be a Christian, or anybody that is conscious of the spiritual life or of goodness. You're open to it, yeah.
Despite the pain, right? I think that's important piece of it. Life is painful. The world is painful. It's hard out there right now. It's hard out there. And as an American, it's hard with all the division and all the rhetoric. It's hard to turn on the television or open your phone or, look at the paper. And that's acknowledging that that's true can actually make space for happiness.
Yeah. So I'll bet you when you went through your convalescence that you gradually developed that spirit, but when it's a lot of pain, it's not easy to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I've been recovering from surgery and really from complications for a very long time now, not just this recent surgery. And, even the last week or so, there's been days where it's just been very painful. And you think, what's the point? What's the point of doing all this work if I'm just going to be in pain or going backwards sometimes? And so getting past that means acknowledging the truth that this pain is real, but also acknowledging the truth that progress comes in not a straight line, and that it just takes a little bit of work every day. And I had a very painful day last week. I just leaned on the people who can see the bigger picture. I couldn't. And so spent some good time with Missy, and she helped me break it down into smaller steps because the bigger picture just was not there for me. I spoke to Sarah Blessing, our co-founder, as well about it, and she really helped. And so, yeah, turning to other people to help look for where the goodness is when things are dark is incredibly important.
So that's what it means to be poor in spirit. In other words, we're not in control of everything, and we hope. We live in hope, and with that spirit, you develop an attitude of openness to what are the possibilities. So that was the first principle I came up with last week. And that is the basic way someone lives in God's goodness, to live in God's mercy, what Christ showed us that's over and over again. He did when he was on earth, so that we live in that attitude. Everything isn't evil. Actually, God is constantly doing good despite the pain. But the second principle is that we don't let, each of us has what we call our true self. And the true self is when you can recognize that you're acting not out of a falseness or a selfishness or an egotistical way, but you're acting after thinking carefully, after acting carefully, after realizing carefully. So in the homily, I gave this example of a family that I read about in the New York Times in a little town in Kansas. And in this town, they actually had voted for the president. They were in favor, really, of the president. But they had in this town a woman from Hong Kong. Her name was Mrs. Hui. And she had been there for 20 years. And she had come from Hong Kong and went to this little town. And she worked in the 2 cafes, and she did cleaning for the people. She was very friendly. She got married and had 3 children, 7-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 14-year-old. The 7-year-old was younger. The 12-year-old just graduated from 8th grade. The 14-year-old just got an award of some kind for agriculture and science research. But she was arrested and put into a detention center. And the people in the town were just angry, most of them very angry. So they raised $20,000 to help her case with the lawyers. Some of the town agreed that she should be put into prison or into the detention centers, but most of them did not. So that's kind of the situation we're in now in the country. What do we do with what's going on? And you can't, when you make a decision to say, what are we going to do? You can't operate from the egotistical part of us or the selfish part of us. We have to say, what is the control part? I talked about Pope Leo, his first homily that he gave when he became the Pope was that he, as a head of the Catholic Church, he's not going to control people, but he's going to minister in charity, and he's going to encourage dialogue and encourage openness and relationship and not control. So these situations we're in, like that woman, how do we as a society work with something like that, getting into our true selves and saying, well, what really is just for that woman? What is really just? And rather than just going along with a control of some kind. So I just posed that to the people in the church. I said, what should we do in these situations today?
Mm-hmm.
That we live in kind of waiting for God's goodness, and we operate from the best of us. Then I didn't do it, but I would say, well, I should have said to the people, now, what are you going to do in your situation, with the problems we have with immigrants or whatever we're going through?
Yeah.
And then I said, you can't live in just letting things happen around you, because we'll be dominated by control systems. And you have to say, I'm not going to let myself be dominated and my freedoms taken away, or our freedoms will be taken away. And how am I going to act wisely so that this doesn't happen?
Mm-hmm.
So that whole Ascension is really a call for us to be mature people, following, that's the basic idea that I was trying to get across.
No, I mean, I love this idea of being mature. What I'm thinking is, this Ascension, okay, see you later, Jesus, you're gone, you're going up to heaven, and you're going to commission us, but you're going to commission us in such a way that we're still human, right? We're going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to need to learn. We're going to need to be better than we are now.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to need to learn humility at times through all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Learn that some things are in our control and other things aren't. And so it's almost a commissioning of being human. Just keep being human, right? But finding the goodness in the world and choosing it. So this idea of choice,
Mm-hmm.
and to do what the right thing is. and really introspectively look at that to say, what are we going to do in various
Mhm.
situations? How are we going to live? And this calling to do that. This is a great moment in history to sit back and say, what are we going to choose as individuals, as a country, as a society, as a world? What are
Mhm.
the choices that we're going to make? It's in our hands. It's our responsibility. Um, so
Mhm.
yeah, it's a profound message, a
Mhm.
profound day.
Mhm.
This idea of the ascension and commissioning.
So there's so many difficult. Like you take the social media today, we really have to say what we hear on the news, is it true? You know, and falsehoods spread so easily on the social media to billions of people. So you have to constantly say to yourself, is what I'm reading, is it really truthful? And we have to be very conscious of truth, because truth is not like subjective, something I think. We all know that. Truth is something objective.
Which is also a choice, right? It's a
Yeah. Right.
choice to be responsible, as you said,
Mm.
to say, okay, I'm going to take this information in, but not necessarily, um, you know, believe it right off the bat, but do the work that you need to do. Search within yourself, search within outside of yourself resources.
Mhm.
Say, is this true or not? It's hard. It's all hard work to
Mhm.
be a good human, isn't it?
It is, but especially when you're with a group of some kind, and the group comes together, and you can really talk things out. I mean, my religious order, we're constantly trying to help people form groups of that would discuss together and pray together and read together.
Mhm.
And I'm in one particular group, we call ourselves L'Espérance, Hope. It's all members of the university here, and we meet, and it's just a joy to be together. People just want to share what they're experiencing, and
Mhm.
when you do that, you sort of find a confidence or a hope by being together. So that's one of the things I think we have to do in society is is talk to each other, like Democrats and Republicans talk to each other and just become friends. That's so basic.
It is so basic, right? It's so far from many people's minds,
Hmm.
um, or even I don't know if it's far from people's minds. I think a lot of people want that, but we
Hmm.
just spoke about it as it's work.
Hmm.
It's work to get there, and that's been the message of my campaigns, uh,
Hmm.
and the message well before campaign, before I wanted to be a politician, right? Well before I decided to run for office,
Hmm.
was about trying to bring people together. I remember my wedding. When you said my wedding, I wrote my own prayer of the faithful
Hmm.
for us. And I had recently gone through that, and it was all about trying to bring people together of people who are on different sides of things to listen.
Hmm.
That was the if you boiled all those prayers down to one, it was, you know, let us pray that we
Hmm.
can listen to one another. So
Yeah. Like each one of us, according to theology I read, especially from this great Thomas Merton, who was right there from Louisville, he says we all have this true self, and we have to find out what we're called to do in life. And if you're, for example, called to bring people together, that's kind of a gift, that you have. We all have this call inside of us of authenticity
yeah,
that we
I
try
don't
to
know if it, I
develop.
don't know if it wins elections or not, Uncle Ted, but maybe it needs to one day, right? It needs
That's
to
right.
one. It
That's
used
right.
to win elections, but right now we're in this moment of division. But I do feel, it's everything's a pendulum. At some point, the value will be how do we
Hmm.
work with one another. And I am seeing, things in Congress in the Senate right now of strange bedfellows, as they say, working together, talking about, Josh Hawley working with Kirsten Gillibrand to make giving birth free in America, right? Those two people, how is that happening, right? And so I am starting to see our leaders find ways to work together again to pass things through. I think we've been in a dead zone for a while there of people working together. My experience was when working in Washington was all bipartisan stuff that we were doing to get telemedicine through, and like Republicans led some of the bills, Democrats led some of their bills. It was great, and then that just seems to have degraded so much. But I see a lot of hope right now, and again, that's a choice to see these places where people who just a year ago would never work together are now starting to say, okay, where can we work together to make America better? And so I personally am having a lot of hope right now in what the future of the country can be.
Well, I'm going to leave that to you and the politicians, because that's what your task is,
Yeah,
But I love the spirit of it that you're talking about is really,
I mean,
that's the way to go.
Just, last night, overnight shift, and I say this in speeches sometimes, and it gets trite in your head eventually. You say it over and over and over again, but it's so true. I just got off a shift. I never once thought of someone's political background when working with them or treating them. Right? I have no idea the nurses and doctors and techs and X-ray technicians and stuff, what their political party was. We're just all working together to help these people. And then the patients who are coming in, I have no idea what their political views are. Right? It's just not how like helping one another works. And so we need to get over that so that we can start to listen and work to one another and take this commissioning that we've had from the Ascension and make better choices.
Yeah, I love that example. That's a great example. A doctor working like that, not caring anything about politics of people.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's literally running for office, I don't think about politics when I'm working. Right? It's an all-encompassing thing once I leave that door, but leave that emergency department. But it's just not how we move through. So there are these places we can look to for examples of how we can work with one another.
Well, Tim, I love we're getting into this kind of depth. I guess you might call it depth. It's to talk about these principles. I just love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm encourage everybody to get into this kind of talk, this kind of discussion where you're sort of knowing where you're operating from, who you are. Yeah.
And I hope, and the feedback we're getting from this podcast is just that it's a diving off point for a lot of people to have deeper discussions, right? Not just listening to the two of us talk about it, but that's the encouragement. Just as you said in your homily, the encouragement here is to, think about this idea of being poor in spirit. Think of this idea of being commissioned and the choices that you make. Think about the idea that, happiness and goodness is a choice. And in doing so, by acknowledging what is not great in the world first, all of these things, how do these live in your life? How do they show up in your life? How do they show up in your work life, your personal life, and with the people you love?
Well, Tim, I can see in your background there in your yard, I don't see any of the goats. So you better get out there and make sure they have a way.
Yep, and we're right at time. So thank you. My Missy walked in before mouthing the word goats to me. So she's the one running after him right now. So I will go do that right now. Thank you, Uncle Ted.
Thank you.
Father Ted. I appreciate you. This another good conversation, and we'll keep it rolling.
Right on. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.